What would you do if a starving mother bear, desperate to save her cubs, came to your door? Would fear take over, or would compassion guide your actions? The late snow clung stubbornly to the mountain slopes, refusing to yield to the hesitant warmth of spring. The forest, once alive with rustling leaves and darting creatures, now lay eerily silent, its stillness broken only by the faint crunch of snow beneath desperate paws. The black bear moved slowly, her steps deliberate. Her body was gaunt and weary, her once sleek and glossy fur now hanging in unkempt patches, a stark testament to the brutal winter that had stripped the mountains of sustenance. Behind her, two cubs trailed, their movements sluggish, their ribs pressing against thin coats of fur. Every step was a struggle for them, yet they clung to their mother with unwavering trust. She was their lifeline, their shield against a world that seemed determined to consume them. The mother bear paused, her breath forming clouds in the cold air as she scanned her surroundings. Her ears twitched, catching distant sounds, the snap of a branch, the call of a raven. Instinct warned her to stay away from the forest's edge, where human settlements sprawled. But desperation gnawed at her, louder than any primal caution. Her cubs whimpered softly, their tiny voices fragile cracks in the frozen landscape. She turned to them, nudging each with her nose as if her touch alone could sustain them. The cubs leaned into her, their trust both a comfort and an ache in her chest. She had failed to find enough food to carry them through the winter, and now, as the thaw teased the land with false promises, she was failing again. For days she had scoured the barren woods in search of life. The streams remained locked under ice. The ground yielded nothing but dry bark and the remnants of last year's berries. She had ventured into the higher ridges, where the snow was thinner, only to find faint traces of voles and the mocking prints of predators just as hungry as she was. Now standing at the forest's edge, she faced a choice that tore at the fabric of her instincts. Beyond the trees lay a human settlement, a place of noise, danger, and strange smells. But there was food there. She could sense it. The scent of meat, of waste, of life clung to the air like both an invitation and a warning. To venture closer would mean risking everything, but to stay would mean certain death for her cubs. Her stomach growled, an empty cavern echoing her fear. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something rich, savory. It was intoxicating, igniting a primal hunger that drowned out her hesitation. She glanced at her cubs, their small frames trembling with exhaustion, and made her decision. Lowering her head, she stepped forward, her body a shadow slipping between the trees. Her cubs followed, their tiny paws sinking into the softening snow, their breath coming in shallow gasps. Each step brought them closer to the boundary between wilderness and humanity, a line she had never dared cross before. When they reached the clearing, the scene before them was surreal. Houses with sloping roofs dotted the landscape, their chimneys puffing trails of smoke into the pale sky. The smell of food was stronger here, mingling with the scent of humans and machines. The mother bear froze, her body tense, ears swiveling to catch every sound. She could hear children laughing in the distance, a dog barking sharply, the hum of a car passing on a nearby road. Her heart pounded, each beat a reminder of how exposed they were. But the hunger was relentless, a clawing force that left no room for retreat. The yard she chose was at the edge of the settlement, bordered by tall pines that offered some semblance of cover. A wooden fence surrounded the property, and beyond it lay a small garden where the remnants of winter vegetables clung stubbornly to life. She nudged the gate with her nose, the metal latch rattling softly. Her cubs pressed against her, their small bodies vibrating with tension. She could feel their hesitation, their instinctive fear of the unknown, but she nudged them forward gently, urging them to trust her. Jennifer Miller sat in her kitchen, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands. The window above the sink offered a view of her yard, where the garden lay dormant, waiting for spring to fully awaken it. She had been meaning to clear out the old vegetables, but hadn't yet mustered the energy. Her life had been a series of delays lately, small tasks piling up as she struggled to balance her work at the local wildlife center with the demands of everyday life. The sight that met her eyes now, however, made her freeze mid-sip. A large black bear stood just beyond her garden fence, her gaunt form a stark silhouette against the snow. Two cubs huddled close to her, their small shapes trembling in the cold. Jennifer's first instinct was fear. Her heart raced as she set down her mug and backed away from the window. Bears were not uncommon in this area, but seeing one this close was unsettling. She reached for her phone, ready to call the wildlife center, but paused when she looked again. The mother bear wasn't acting aggressively. She stood still, her head low, her body radiating exhaustion rather than menace. Jennifer's gaze shifted to the cubs, and her breath caught. They were painfully thin, their legs wobbling beneath them. She had seen animals in distress before, but something about this scene was different. It was the way the mother bear held herself, as if every ounce of strength she had left was being spent on standing guard over her cubs. It was a posture of desperation, not dominance. Jennifer moved carefully to the back door, her eyes never leaving the bears. She knew better than to approach them, but her heart ached at the sight of their suffering. She opened the door slightly, the cold air rushing in, and called out softly. "Hey there," she murmured, her voice trembling. The mother bear's ears twitched, and she turned her head slightly, her dark eyes locking onto Jennifer's. For a moment, the two mothers regarded each other across the space that separated them, a silent understanding passing between them. Jennifer felt a lump rise in her throat. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she couldn't turn them away. The cubs whimpered, their small voices breaking the spell. The mother bear shifted her weight, her body language cautious but not threatening. Jennifer stepped back inside and grabbed the loaf of bread she'd been planning to throw out. It wasn't much, but it was something. She returned to the door, tore the bread into pieces, and tossed them into the yard, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. The mother bear hesitated, sniffing the air, then nudged her cubs forward. They stumbled toward the food, their small jaws working furiously as they devoured it. Jennifer watched, her chest tightening. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing, but she couldn't ignore the look in the mother bear's eyes, a look that mirrored her own determination to protect those she loved, no matter the cost. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long, golden streaks across the snow-covered yard. Jennifer stood at her kitchen window again, hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug, though the warmth barely reached her fingers. Her eyes were fixed on the garden, where the black bear and her cubs had returned. They moved slowly, cautiously, the mother pausing every few steps to survey her surroundings. The cubs stayed close, their small frames hunched against the lingering cold. Jennifer's heart ached at the sight of them. The bread she had left the day before was long gone, and though she knew feeding wild animals was frowned upon, she couldn't shake the feeling that turning them away would be a betrayal of her own humanity. The bear's eyes found hers again, a deep, unspoken connection lingering in the space between them. Jennifer didn't flinch. Instead, she set her mug down, pulled on her coat, and stepped outside with a measured calm. She carried a bag of apples and an old loaf of bread she had dug out of her freezer. As she approached the edge of the porch, she moved slowly, careful not to startle the bears. The mother bear watched her, muscles taut but not hostile. Jennifer knelt and placed the food on the ground, then backed away, giving the animals space. The cubs hesitated, glancing at their mother, who let out a low, rumbling sound that seemed to reassure them. Slowly, they approached the food, their tiny noses twitching as they began to eat. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat as she watched them, their fragile forms illuminated by the morning light. She could see now just how dire their situation was. Their fur matted, their movements weak, their bodies mere shadows of what they should have been. Jennifer turned away, her mind racing. She knew this wasn't sustainable. The bears needed more than scraps from her kitchen. They needed real help, the kind of support she couldn't provide alone. Her first thought was to call the wildlife center where she worked part-time, but a pang of doubt stopped her. She had seen cases like this before. Animals deemed nuisances or threats simply because they had strayed too close to human territory. Would calling for help mean condemning this family to relocation? Or worse? She shook her head, pushing the thought aside. There had to be another way. By mid-morning, the bears had retreated to the tree line, where they rested under the cover of the pines. Jennifer watched them from a distance, her heart heavy with the weight of their plight. She decided to call her friend Mark, a wildlife rehabilitator with years of experience working with bears. Mark was someone she trusted, someone who cared deeply about animals and understood the delicate balance between helping and interfering. When he picked up, his voice was calm but tinged with concern as she explained the situation. "You're walking a fine line, Jen," he said after a pause. "Feeding them directly isn't ideal, but I get why you're doing it. Let me come by and take a look. Maybe we can figure out a plan that doesn't put them or you in danger." Mark arrived an hour later, his truck rumbling up the gravel driveway. He stepped out, his tall frame bundled in a heavy jacket, his face etched with years of wisdom and the faint lines of worry. Jennifer met him at the porch, leading him quietly to the edge of the yard, where the bears were still resting. Mark crouched, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the scene: the mother's gaunt frame, the cubs' frailty, the way they huddled close to each other for warmth. He let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "They're in rough shape," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But they're fighters, the mother especially. Look at her. She's exhausted, but she's still standing, still protecting them. That kind of determination is rare." Jennifer felt a lump rise in her throat as she followed Mark's gaze. The mother bear had shifted slightly, her eyes flicking toward them with cautious awareness. Mark reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook, jotting down observations as he spoke. "We'll need to get them some proper nutrition, high-calorie food to help them build up their strength. But we have to be careful. If they get too used to humans providing for them, it'll hurt their chances of survival in the long run. The goal is to help them enough to get through this rough patch, then let them return to the wild on their own terms." Jennifer nodded, relief washing over her. Mark's plan made sense, and she felt a spark of hope for the first time since the bears had appeared. Over the next few days, they worked together to implement his strategy. Mark brought specialized wildlife feed, mixing it with natural foraging materials to encourage the bears' instincts. Jennifer documented the process, taking careful notes and photographs to share with the community. At first, she was hesitant to involve others, fearing judgment or backlash, but Mark convinced her that transparency was important. "If people understand what we're doing and why," he said, "they're more likely to support it, and who knows, they might even want to help." As word spread, the community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors expressed concern, worried that the bears posed a threat to their safety. Others were moved by the story and offered to help, donating food or volunteering their time. Jennifer worked tirelessly to address both perspectives, holding informal meetings to educate her neighbors about the bears and the importance of conservation. Her passion was contagious, and slowly, the tide began to turn. People who had once viewed the bears as intruders started to see them as survivors, symbols of resilience and the fragile connection between humans and nature. One evening, as Jennifer stood on her porch watching the bears from a distance, a car pulled into her driveway. It was her neighbor, Linda, a retired teacher who had been one of the most vocal opponents of Jennifer's efforts. Linda stepped out, her expression hesitant but sincere. "I brought some salmon," she said, holding up a small cooler. "Figured it might help." Jennifer blinked, momentarily stunned, before breaking into a smile. "Thank you," she said warmly. "That means a lot." Linda nodded, her gaze shifting to the bears. "I still think it's risky," she admitted, "but I can't stop thinking about those cubs. They deserve a chance, don't they?" Jennifer's heart swelled with gratitude as she accepted the cooler. Moments like these reminded her why she had chosen to fight for the bears, despite the challenges. It wasn't just about saving one family. It was about fostering compassion, about reminding people of the shared responsibility they had to care for the world around them. That night, as she watched the bears eating under the soft glow of the moon, Jennifer felt a quiet sense of triumph. They weren't out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively, but they were moving in the right direction, and for now that was enough. As the days turned into weeks, the bears began to show signs of recovery. The cubs moved with more energy, their once frail bodies filling out as their strength returned. The mother bear, though still cautious and weary, seemed less desperate, her dark eyes watching over her cubs with a quiet resilience. Jennifer documented each milestone with meticulous care, her camera capturing moments that spoke of survival, hope, and the fragile balance between humans and wildlife. The photos told a story that transcended words. The cubs playing in the snow, their tiny faces smeared with berries, the mother resting with one paw protectively draped over them. These snapshots became the heart of a growing movement, a testament to the impact of compassion and the power of unity. Jennifer's updates, shared online and in local community groups, garnered attention far beyond her quiet mountain town. What had begun as a small effort to save a struggling bear family now sparked conversations about wildlife conservation and the role of humans in protecting the natural world. Messages poured in from people offering support. Some donated money, others sent supplies, and a few even shared their own stories of encounters with wildlife. Jennifer felt overwhelmed but grateful. It was as if the bears had become a symbol, their struggle resonating with people in ways she hadn't anticipated. Yet with the influx of attention came new challenges. Not everyone agreed with her approach, and some voiced concerns about the potential dangers of encouraging bears to approach human settlements. Jennifer's resolve was tested one afternoon when she received a call from a local journalist who had heard about her efforts. "We'd love to feature your story," the reporter said, her tone eager. "It's an inspiring example of human kindness." Jennifer hesitated, glancing out the window at the bears resting near the tree line. She knew the risks of drawing too much attention. The bears were still vulnerable, and the last thing they needed was a spotlight that could lead to interference, or worse, relocation. But she also understood the importance of raising awareness. After a moment's thought, she agreed, on the condition that the story focus on the broader message of coexistence and conservation. The article, published both online and in the local paper, was met with an outpouring of support. Donations increased, and volunteers stepped forward to help manage the growing initiative. Mark worked tirelessly alongside Jennifer, organizing food deliveries and coordinating with conservation experts to ensure the bears' needs were met without jeopardizing their ability to survive in the wild. He stressed the importance of maintaining a delicate balance. "We're not domesticating them," he reminded everyone. "We're giving them a chance to recover so they can return to their natural habitat." The community's involvement deepened as more people came to understand the gravity of the bear's plight. Children wrote letters and drew pictures of the bear family, their innocent perspectives adding a touch of joy to the serious work being done. Local businesses pitched in, offering supplies and spreading the word to customers. Even those who had initially been skeptical began to see the bears in a different light. One neighbor, an older man named Frank, approached Jennifer with a basket of fresh fish. "I still don't like the idea of wild animals so close to my property," he admitted, his gruff voice softened by a hint of sheepishness. "But I can't ignore what you're doing. It's admirable," Jennifer smiled, accepting the basket with a nod of gratitude. "Thank you, Frank. It means a lot." Moments like these bolstered her determination, reminding her why she had taken on this responsibility in the first place. It wasn't just about saving the bears. It was about fostering a sense of shared responsibility, about proving that humans and wildlife could coexist without fear or harm. Yet as the bears continued to recover, Jennifer couldn't shake the lingering worry that their success might attract the wrong kind of attention. Her fears were realized one evening when a sleek black SUV pulled into her driveway, its government insignia gleaming in the fading sunlight. Two wildlife officials stepped out, their expressions unreadable, but their presence unmistakably authoritative. Jennifer's stomach tightened as they introduced themselves, explaining that they had received reports about the bears and were here to assess the situation. She led them to the edge of the yard, where the bears were lounging under the trees, their silhouettes bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The officials observed in silence, their clipped notes and occasional whispers, heightening Jennifer's anxiety. After what felt like an eternity, one of the officials turned to her. "We understand your intentions are good," he began, his tone measured. "But this is a delicate situation. Encouraging wild animals to rely on humans can have long-term consequences, not just for them, but for the community." Jennifer bristled, her hands tightening into fists. "I'm not encouraging reliance," she said firmly. "I'm helping them survive. They were on the brink of starvation when they came here. If we hadn't stepped in, they wouldn't have made it." The official nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I understand, and I commend your efforts. but our job is to ensure the safety of both the wildlife and the people in this area. We'll need to monitor the bears closely and make a decision about their future." Jennifer's heart sank, but she forced herself to remain composed. "They're almost ready to return to the wild," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "We've been working with a rehabilitator to make sure they can transition back safely." The officials exchanged a glance, then nodded. "We'll review your plan and follow up soon," one of them said. As they left, Jennifer stood on the porch, her mind racing. She felt a mix of relief and unease. While they hadn't immediately intervened, their presence was a reminder of how fragile the situation was. She couldn't afford any mistakes. Over the next few days, Jennifer doubled her efforts, working closely with Mark to fine-tune the bears' rehabilitation process. They introduced more foraging opportunities, gradually reducing the amount of food provided by humans. The bears adapted quickly, their instincts sharpening as they explored the surrounding woods. The community too rallied behind Jennifer, their collective support a testament to the power of shared purpose. Together, they had transformed the yard into a safe haven, a place where the bears could heal without losing their wildness. And yet, Jennifer knew their time together was drawing to a close. The mother bear's movements were growing bolder, her cubs more independent. The forest was calling them back, and Jennifer could feel the inevitability of their departure. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of golden amber, Jennifer stood at the edge of the yard, watching the bears for what she knew might be the last time. The mother bear lifted her head, her gaze meeting Jennifer's across the expanse of grass and snow. It was a moment of quiet understanding, a farewell that needed no words. The bears turned and disappeared into the trees, their dark forms melting into the shadows. Jennifer felt a pang of loss, but also a deep sense of fulfillment. They had come so far, and though their journey was far from over, they were ready to face it together. The early spring air carried a softness that hinted at the season's slow but certain arrival. The snow had finally receded, giving way to patches of green that seemed to spread like quiet whispers across the landscape. Jennifer stood at the edge of her porch, the morning light casting a warm glow over the yard. It had been days since the mother bear and her cubs had wandered into the forest, and though she knew this was the goal, the emptiness left behind was palpable. Her mornings, once filled with the quiet observation of their fragile recovery, now felt oddly still. She had grown accustomed to their presence, to the way their story had become interwoven with her own. And yet, she reminded herself, this was exactly how it was meant to be. The forest had called them back, and they had answered, as wild creatures should. Jennifer had barely begun to adjust to the quiet when an unexpected sound stirred her from her thoughts, the distant crunch of tires on gravel. She turned to see Mark's truck rolling up the driveway, its familiar hum a comforting interruption. He stepped out, his broad figure framed by the rising sun, a folder tucked under his arm. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying its usual steady calm. "Thought I'd stop by to check in. How are you holding up?" Jennifer managed a small smile. "I'm fine, just adjusting. It's strange, not having them here. I keep looking out at the yard, expecting to see them." Mark nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's normal to feel that way. You invested a lot of time and care into them. It's hard to let go." He handed her the folder, which contained detailed notes and photographs documenting the bear's journey. Jennifer flipped through the pages, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and melancholy. The images told a story of resilience, the cubs' gradual transformation from fragile, trembling creatures to playful, energetic young bears. The mother's unwavering vigilance, the quiet bond that had formed between them and the humans who had chosen to help. "They've come so far," Jennifer murmured, her fingers lingering on a photo of the cubs wrestling in the snow. Mark smiled. "They have, and it's because of you and this community. You gave them a fighting chance." The conversation turned to logistics. Mark had been monitoring the bear's movements using a tracking device temporarily attached to the mother. "They're doing well," he reported. "They've been sticking to the higher elevations, foraging on their own. No signs of dependence on humans. That's a good sign." Jennifer felt a wave of relief, though it was tempered by the knowledge that their journey was far from over. The wilderness was unpredictable, and survival was never guaranteed. But the thought that they had a chance, one they might not have had without her intervention, was enough to quiet her lingering doubts. As the weeks passed, the bears faded from the forefront of Jennifer's life, but never from her thoughts. The community, too, began to settle back into its routine, though the impact of the bears' story lingered. Inspired by the experience, Jennifer spearheaded a local initiative to promote wildlife education and conservation. She organized workshops, bringing in experts like Mark to teach people about coexistence and the importance of preserving natural habitats. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Children who had once feared the woods now saw them as places of wonder. Neighbors who had been wary of wildlife began to view it with a newfound respect. The bears had left more than tracks in the snow. They had left a legacy of understanding and connection. Months later, on a crisp summer morning, Jennifer found herself drawn back to the forest. Armed with a camera and a backpack filled with supplies, she set out on one of her favorite trails, her footsteps light but purposeful. The woods were alive with sound: bird song, the rustle of leaves, the distant babble of a stream. It was a stark contrast to the silence of winter, a reminder of nature's endless cycles of renewal. As she walked, she couldn't help but wonder if the bears were nearby. She had no intention of seeking them out. She knew better than to disturb their new lives, but the thought that they might still be thriving brought a quiet sense of comfort. She stopped at a clearing, the same one where she had first seen the mother bear and her cubs. The memory came rushing back, the desperation in the mother's eyes, the frailty of the cubs, the way they had looked to her with a mix of fear and hope. Jennifer knelt, brushing her fingers against the earth, now soft and warm beneath her touch. It was hard to believe how much had changed since that day. As she stood to leave, her eyes caught something in the dirt, a paw print pressed deep into the soil. Her breath hitched as she knelt again, tracing the outline with her fingers. It was unmistakable, the print of a black bear, larger and more defined than she remembered. Her heart swelled with emotion, a mixture of joy and longing. They had been here, not long ago. They had survived. Jennifer snapped a photo of the print before stepping back, her eyes scanning the trees as if she might catch a glimpse of them. But the forest remained still, its secrets held close. She smiled, a bittersweet feeling settling over her. It was enough to know they were out there, thriving in the wild where they belonged. As she made her way back to the trailhead, her thoughts turned to the broader impact of their story. The bears had been a catalyst, not just for her, but for the entire community. They had reminded everyone of the fragile interconnectedness of life, of the responsibility humans carried to protect and coexist with the natural world. By the time Jennifer reached her porch that evening, the sun was dipping low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and amber. She stood there for a long moment, watching as the light faded and the first stars began to appear. The forest stretched out before her, vast and unknowable, its edges blurred by the soft glow of twilight. It was a place of mystery and danger, but also of beauty and hope. And somewhere within its depths, a mother bear and her cubs were carving out their own path, guided by the instincts and strength that had carried them this far. Jennifer felt a quiet sense of closure as she turned and stepped inside. The bear's story had come full circle, and though she would likely never see them again, their presence lingered in her heart, a reminder of the power of compassion and the enduring connection between humans and nature. As she settled into her chair, her camera resting on the table beside her, she glanced at the photo of the paw print, its edges crisp and clear. It was a symbol of survival, of resilience, and of the indelible mark one life could leave on another. She smiled, her mind at peace, knowing that the bond she had forged with the bears would never truly fade, even as the seasons turned and the wild carried them forward into an uncertain but promising future. This story is a testament to the profound connection between humans and nature, reminding us of the compassion we are capable of showing even in the face of uncertainty. It highlights the delicate balance of coexistence, where kindness and respect can bridge the gap between worlds often seen as separate. Through the journey of the mother bear and her cubs, we see the resilience of life and the power of community when people come together with a shared purpose. The lessons here are clear. Every small act of kindness matters, and our choices, no matter how insignificant they may seem, have the potential to create ripples of positive change. We are reminded that humanity's role is not to dominate nature, but to protect it, understanding that its survival is intricately tied to our own. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you something to reflect on, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can explore more stories that connect us to the heart of life and encourage meaningful action. Your support helps us continue sharing these important messages. See you in the next story.